It started on a quiet Thursday evening. The headlines were routine. Nothing seemed unusual until a 5-second audio snippet began circulating in underground political forums. A woman's voice, unmistakably seasoned with years of power and pressure, could be heard saying, "If you go through with this, there will be consequences. Big ones, JD." The second voice, calm but firm, replied, "I wasn't elected to play games, Nancy." Within an hour, the leak hit the mainstream, and Washington went still. News anchors stumbled over their words, podcasts erupted, Twitter melted. What had just happened? Why was Nancy Pelosi, one of the most iconic political figures of the last 2 decades, speaking in threats to J.D. Vance, the current vice president? Nobody knew yet what the call was really about. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just political drama. This was personal, and it was deep. Inside the White House, J.D. stood in the Roosevelt room quietly watching the coverage with a worn expression. He wasn't angry. He wasn't surprised. He whispered to his aide, "It was only a matter of time." And just like that, America braced for the storm. By morning, the full audio was released by an anonymous whistleblower. Unedited, raw. The call was 13 minutes and 42 seconds long. Every word shook the room. Nancy Pelosi sounded tense, not just like a politician defending her party, but like a woman cornered, almost panicked. "You can't back this bill, JD," she said, her voice trembling in parts. "You don't know what it'll unleash." JD responded slowly. "I've read it. I believe in it. The country needs it." What was it? What bill could cause so much fear? Enough to push Pelosi into a late-night call to the vice president. The public didn't know yet. But deeper into the call, her tone changed. It wasn't just politics anymore. She mentioned names. She mentioned families. She even mentioned JD's late mother, in a line that made the entire internet pause. "Think of your mother, JD. She'd never want you to go down this path." The line struck a nerve. JD's mother had battled addiction. She died when he was 19. He rarely spoke of her publicly, but here was Pelosi, bringing her into a political negotiation. Tears welled in JD's eyes as he heard it played back on CNN that evening. He turned away from the screen, not out of weakness, but to protect a memory too sacred to share with the world. So what was the bill? Buried beneath media speculation was the Veterans Accountability Dignity Act, a sweeping piece of legislation championed quietly by J.D. Vance for over a year. It would overhaul VA hospitals, expose billions in wasted contracts, and bring private corporations under federal review for decades of abuse toward veterans. The bill was popular with the public, but dangerous to the deep pockets of D.C. Pelosi wasn't against helping veterans. That much was clear. But there were names tied to this bill, people who'd funded both parties, friends, family. And if the bill passed, it wouldn't just hurt reputations, it could collapse careers, maybe even spark investigations. In the call, Pelosi warned, "There are men in this town who've buried smaller stories with bigger consequences. Don't make yourself a target, JD." But what she didn't expect, what none of them expected, was JD's quiet, unwavering fire. "I've seen what corruption does to the powerless," he told her. "This isn't about politics anymore. It's about doing the right thing, even if it breaks me." And in that moment, something shifted in the American people. This wasn't just a leak. This was a war cry. Long before J.D. Vance was vice president, he was just a boy in Middletown, Ohio, raised in a home where struggle was daily and survival wasn't guaranteed. His mother, Bev, fought addiction. His father left early. But his grandfather, Papa, made him a promise one night J.D. never forgot. "If you ever get the power to fix what broke our family, don't waste it on fear." That night, J.D. was only 9. But now, standing in the West Wing, clutching the leaked transcript in his hand. Those words thundered in his heart. Pelosi's voice echoed from the recording. "You know this bill won't just expose companies. It'll expose people, families. Yours too." JD's breath caught in his chest. She was right, in one sense. The deeper he dug, the more truth he uncovered. Truth about medical suppliers lying to VA hospitals. Truth about drugs swapped, lives lost, vets dying alone. And somewhere along that trail was a name JD never expected, one linked to his own past. For the first time, it wasn't just about doing the right thing. It was about making peace with the ghosts of his own family. And America? They were only beginning to understand the cost. At exactly 3:47 a.m., JD sat alone in his office, the lights dimmed, the city asleep. A veteran named Carlos Mendoza had just sent him an email. The subject line read, "You're the first to care." Carlos lost both legs in Afghanistan. When he returned, he was bounced from 5 VA centers. One of them gave him expired insulin. The other falsified his surgical report. The last one lost his records entirely. He ended up homeless in Indiana for 2 years. His story was only one of thousands JD had read. But this one broke him, because Carlos had been in the same platoon as JD's childhood friend, Robbie Jenkins, who died by suicide after leaving the military. JD remembered Robbie's last message. "The war didn't kill me. Coming home did." JD broke down, not the usual silent tears of a polished politician, but the kind of sobbing that shakes your body when you know you're holding centuries of pain in your hands. And the worst part? Congress wasn't fighting the bill because it was wrong. They were fighting it because it revealed how much they'd failed. Nancy Pelosi didn't expect the world to hear that call. But now that they had, reporters swarmed every inch of her personal life. In public, she looked calm, composed. But privately, she was crumbling. One night, alone in her kitchen, Pelosi stared at an old picture. It was her son, Paul Jr., back when he was healthy, before the investigations, before the scandals. What nobody knew was this: Pelosi's panic during that phone call wasn't just political. It was maternal. Because one of the companies JD's bill would expose had a quiet investor, Paul Pelosi Jr., and if JD moved forward, it wouldn't just bring political embarrassment. It could send her son to prison. In the leaked call, Nancy's voice broke, not as a speaker of the House, but as a mother. "Please, I'm asking you, not for me, for my son. I'm begging you, JD." But JD didn't interrupt. He didn't gloat. He didn't threaten her back. He just said, "You asked me to think about my mother. Now I'm asking you to think about your son. Would she want this hidden?" Pelosi didn't answer. She just went silent. 3 days after the leak, JD Vance received a package. No return address, no markings, just a plain envelope with a military dog tag taped to the front. Inside, there was a handwritten letter. It was from Private First Class William Hahn, a 23-year-old soldier battling terminal cancer linked to toxic exposure at Camp Lejeune, one of the very bases named in JD's bill. "They told me my pain was in my head, Mr. Vance. Now I can't walk, can't eat, can't breathe without help. But my mom said something last night. She said maybe you're the one man up there who still cares." JD read the letter in full silence. The last line read, "If I'm not alive to see it pass, please make sure my brothers don't die like this too." JD folded the letter, hands shaking, and stared at the tag. He didn't wipe the tear that rolled down his cheek. This bill was no longer about pressure or politics. It was a promise. While the media chased rumors, the true source of the leaked audio was hiding in plain sight. Evan Miller, a young congressional aide who once worked under both Pelosi and JD during bipartisan committee sessions. Evan had a rare gift. He listened. He never raised his voice, never showed ambition. But he watched everything. What made him leak the call? Evan's father had died in a VA hospital in 2017. Wrong medication, wrong chart, covered up. When Evan tried to get answers, he was ignored. When he heard Nancy's call to JD, begging to bury the bill, something inside him snapped. "I didn't do it to bring her down," he told a friend. "I did it to protect the man who didn't fold when everyone else did." He didn't want fame. He didn't want money. He just wanted the truth to live longer than his father did. And now, he was being hunted by Washington's elite, painted as a traitor. But to JD Vance, Evan wasn't a traitor. He was a whistleblower with a spine made of steel. In a hospital room in Baltimore, Paul Pelosi Jr. sat by a window, far from cameras and courtroom lights. His health had quietly declined. A rare neurological disorder. No headlines, no press. Only Nancy knew how much pain he was in. That's why she begged JD to slow the bill, to buy time, not to escape punishment, but to say goodbye. JD didn't know the full truth when the call leaked. But now, with Evan's leak explained, and his team tracing Pelosi Jr.'s investments to the same corrupt firm hurting veterans, the lines were no longer black and white. One afternoon, JD stood quietly outside Paul's hospital room. Nancy was inside, holding her son's hand. He didn't interrupt. He didn't speak. He just stood there, silently praying for a son he never knew, and a mother who had made the wrong decision for all the right reasons. "Sometimes justice needs to pause," JD said softly to his aide. "But it never stops." In that moment, viewers across America saw a different kind of power. Not one of vengeance, but of compassion, grief, and integrity. And hearts broke across the country. 3 weeks after the leak, President Bailey summoned JD to the Oval Office. He didn't smile. No handshake. Just silence. Aides closed the doors. The president dropped a manila folder on the desk. Inside were polling numbers, donor reactions, and classified memos. "You made a choice that may cost us re-election," Bailey said, his voice low. JD didn't blink. "I made a choice that saved my soul." The room grew still. Pelosi's call had shaken everything. Her quiet warning to bury the vet's first bill wasn't just political. It exposed how deep corporate hands were buried in Capitol Hill. Now donors were panicking, old allies were flipping. But JD stood firm. He knew that if they folded now, millions of veterans would lose everything. He rose from his seat, looked the president in the eye, and said, "Sir, if keeping a promise means losing an election, then maybe we don't deserve the win." Viewers across America wiped tears from their eyes. This wasn't just politics anymore. It was personal. The town hall in Columbus was supposed to be routine. But then Maya Sandoval stepped up to the mic. She clutched a photo of her son, Anthony. He was 19 when he enlisted. Died at 22. No flag-draped funeral. No folded triangle. Just silence. "I wrote to your office 2 years ago. I didn't think anyone would answer," she said, her voice trembling. JD stood still. She continued. "Then last week I got this." She held up a printed copy of the bill, with a handwritten note from JD. "Your son mattered, and he always will." The room went quiet. "No one in Washington ever told me the truth about what happened," she whispered. "But you did." People began to cry. JD walked down from the podium, hugged her gently, and said, "We won't let them hide anymore." That moment, filmed by a bystander, went viral. Not because it was political, but because it was human. Because behind every policy, there's a mother who hasn't healed. And JD wasn't running from that pain. He was carrying it. Late one evening, JD received a secure email. No subject line, no signature, just a link. He hesitated, then clicked. It was a second audio recording, taken moments after the call that leaked. A continuation no one knew existed.
Pelosi's voice was softer. She wasn't scheming now. She was pleading. I wasn't always this way, JD. When Paul got sick, I lost my grip. I know what I'm doing is wrong, but I don't know how to stop anymore. JD's hand covered his mouth. You could hear his voice next, from the past. Then let me help you do one right thing before it's too late. The screen faded. JD sat there, alone in his home office, the nightlight casting long shadows. It wasn't blackmail. It wasn't politics. It was two broken leaders on opposite sides, trying to find a sliver of redemption in a world that rewards power over people. The question now was, would Nancy step into the light or bury the truth forever?
JD was in Cleveland for a speech when his team handed him a handwritten letter. It was from Walter Briggs, a 91-year-old Korean War veteran. Inside was a photo of a much younger Walter, in uniform, beside a burned-out tent in Busan. Mr. Vice President, the letter read, I've watched Washington lie to my brothers for 70 years, but last week I watched you tell the truth on national TV. I cried, son, not because you were strong, but because you were finally honest. JD folded the letter, hands trembling. He asked for a few minutes alone before walking on stage. He didn't rehearse, didn't check the script. He walked up, held up Walter's letter and said, We've all inherited a system built on silence. But silence is not service. It's betrayal. The room erupted in tears and applause. Across the country, that clip spread like wildfire. Because in a city of cold calculations, J.D. Vance had found his voice. 3 days later, J.D. received an unmarked envelope. No return address. Inside, a Georgetown address and 2 words. Come alone. Secret Service objected, but J.D. insisted. He knocked on the old wooden door. Nancy Pelosi answered, without makeup, without a smile. She looked tired, older, human. I didn't leak it, she whispered, but I'm glad someone did. They sat in silence for a moment. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out a dusty file. This is the original draft of the vet's first bill, from 2008. We never passed it. I never had the spine. J.D. took it slowly, carefully. You still can, he said. You still matter. Nancy's voice broke. I don't want to be remembered as someone who blocked healing. J.D. stood, walked toward the door, but then turned around. Then don't. It wasn't politics anymore. It was legacy. The camera rolled silently as J.D. attended the burial of Corporal Mason Evans, a veteran who died by suicide last week after his benefits were denied for the 3rd time. J.D. didn't speak at the ceremony. He stood in the rain, hat off, head bowed, beside Mason's mother. After the final prayer, he walked to her and knelt beside the headstone. I'm sorry we were late, he said, but we will not be too late for the next Mason. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. The footage wasn't planned. It wasn't political, but it went viral within hours because it captured something rare, a leader grieving, not for optics, but because it hurt. Back in D.C., J.D. met with Senate leaders and pushed again for emergency passage of the revised vet's first bill. If we don't pass it, he told the room, don't you dare show up at another soldier's funeral. No one spoke. No one moved. The leaked audio was no longer a scandal. It was a reckoning. The entire country had heard the call, but no one knew who leaked it. Until now. At 2:17 a.m., a former congressional aide named Lena Ortiz posted a video on her anonymous blog. Her voice trembled. I leaked the audio. I had to. My brother died waiting for treatment the system kept promising but never gave. I worked for the speaker. I know how the game is played, but J.D. Vance wasn't playing. He was trying to fix it. Lena's video broke the internet. Within hours, networks picked it up. She wasn't afraid of going to prison. If this leak saves even one more life, it was worth it. In response, J.D. Vance released a brief statement. Lena, wherever you are, I'm not angry. I'm grateful. Pelosi didn't comment, but something in Washington shifted that night. Not just power, not just perception, conscience. It was a Thursday, rain, cold, and yet, for the first time in years, the Capitol steps were full of veterans, in wheelchairs, with canes, and folded flags in hand. Inside the chamber, the vet's first act was up for final vote. Pelosi sat quietly in the back row. J.D. Vance, composed but intense, stepped up to the podium. We've debated this long enough. It's time to do something braver than talk. Let's finally act. For Walter, for Mason, for Lena's brother, for all of them. As he sat, the vote began. One by one, the green lights lit up. Then came a pause. One final name. Nancy Pelosi. She stood slowly, looked J.D. in the eyes. Aye. Gasps. Applause. She nodded once, then turned away, tears quietly streaming. The bill passed, unanimously. In that moment, party lines didn't matter. Human lives did. 3 weeks later, J.D. sat in his Ohio home, staring at the same photo that had always hung above his fireplace. His pawpaw, in uniform, holding J.D.'s mother as a baby. His phone buzzed, a voicemail, from Nancy. You were right, J.D., about all of it. I don't know how history will remember me, but I hope it remembers what you did, what you stood for. He smiled faintly. Behind him, his young son ran into the room, clutching a tiny American flag from a school parade. Daddy, look, I'm like Papa. J.D. knelt, hugged him tightly. You'll be even better, he whispered. Because this wasn't just about winning a vote. It was about building a future where truth wins, where leaders serve people, not polls, and where one quiet phone call changed everything. Now it's your turn. If this story moved your heart, made you tear up, or gave you hope for real leadership, don't scroll away. Like this video if you believe truth still matters. Subscribe for more true, emotional, eye-opening stories every week, and please, drop a comment below. What part of this story touched you the most? What do you want to see leaders stand for? Let your voice be heard. Together, we're building a channel and a country led by truth. Truth wins. J.D. Vance. Leaked call. Emotional story. Subscribe now.